What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am welcoming back to the show. It's been a long day. I'm not even gonna edit that out. It
No,
works out so good.
no, it's too
Welcome
good.
back to the toe. Welcome back to the toe, Tim. Tim, welcome back.
I did not. Okay, let me be frank with you. I did not know when I agreed to come back that this had turned into a foot fetish podcast. And
Listen, things happen. All right, we went from beard now to
listen,
toes.
you gotta make that paper. That's what I'm saying.
It's hard out there for podcasters.
So welcome to the toe.
Yeah, welcome to the toe. So, well,
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
yeah, man, Tim, it's been a while. So I think last time I had you on the show, we were talking about Teen Titans Academy, and everyone was bugging you who's Red X. We were talking about Masters of the Universe. You the I think the Blu-ray release of Long Halloween had just come out or was about to come out. So you were really busy. And
That
so
was a wild, yeah, that was a wild summer. Like, so I had like just started like doing comics. They had, they were coming out. I'd worked in TV and animation for a while, not very long, but long enough at that point. And that's in fact how I got into DC Comics, was through my TV work, and specifically with DC characters. And and it just is this wild summer when in 2021, I guess it was, when everything was just all hitting that summer, where it was Long Halloween, it was Masters of the Universe Revelation,
Yep.
hit on Netflix, which I did with Kevin Smith. Teen Titans Academy was out at that point. Shazam was doing a Shazam miniseries.
Yep.
Was coming out. We were at the point where we were probably at the point where I was like, ooh, Titans Academy is not what people expected, and they're not all that thrilled with how we sold it to how they sold it to people. I think that we might have we learned I learned a lot. I mean, that was my first foray into comics, and I just kept saying yes to everything. And in retrospect, it's like things like you said about, like you were talking about, like, people wanting to know who Red X is,
Right.
And I feel like we could have done a better job of really explaining to people that this is not the Red X from the show that you remember, that
Yeah.
he'll appear in the book, but we will not reveal his identity. We will reveal this new Red X's identity. And I think that was kind of I think people got excited about learning the identity of that mystery Red X.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, from day one, when they asked me, I was well into working on the story for Titans Academy, and it had nothing to do with, we didn't know anything about Red X being involved at that point. And my editor came to me and said, hey, looks like we're going to be able to use Red X. Warner Animation says it's okay for us to bring him into continuity. Would you bring him into Titans Academy? And I said, hell no. No. I mean, I love that show so much, and I love that character so much, and I love the mystery around that character. I would have revealed the identity of that particular second Red X who followed Dick Grayson to be Red X. But I have such respect for Glenn Murakami, who made that show. And he had said publicly that he would never reveal the identity of that character. And I was like, well, then not only is it not my place then to do that, when somebody else has worked on this and created this character, who the heck am I to come in and tell you, oh, it's this guy? But then also on top of that, I felt like, it would have been non-canonical anyway to people. I feel like if I had just invented who that character was, people would have gotten, maybe they would have been excited at who I said it was, but then there would have been every opportunity for everybody else to say, well, but that's just what Tim Sheridan said. That's not really who it was necessarily. We got to ask the guys who made the show.
Right.
So it was kind of a rock and a hard place. And that's why I thought, oh, perfect solution. We'll just, have this new younger character come in as Red X, who's been raised by that Red X, who's been turned into a sidekick weapon by that Red X, like all the sidekicks, that we're meeting and that we're talking about.
Right.
And I was like, I'm a genius. And there were a lot of people who were like, what? Who is this? Why do I care? What's interesting though is the two, like, I've talked about this publicly before, and I mean, I'm happy to, like, I won't go into too much detail about it, but ultimately the solution to who even that Red X, my Red X, who that Red X wasn't my solution. DC made me change it.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll change the whole story,
Yeah.
so, and it, they just didn't think it would be satisfying. They didn't think my solution would be satisfying. But I think the solution they wanted to go with was even less satisfying, I think. But
So you're like, oh man. So then it really is just like, that's a tough.
Yeah, it was a strange thing. I'm very, very proud of that book. I'm very proud of it because it was the first time I was at bat. And I was only going to do 12 issues and then move on to something else. I did 15 when we, and then we ended the book. And, things were in a lot of turmoil during that period.
Yeah.
DC, Warner Brothers had been sold to AT&T, then it was sold to Discovery, and everybody at DC, I think at that time, was just waiting to get laid off. They didn't know what was huge layoffs were happening all across Warner Brothers, and comics are a tough business, and I think a lot of people were expecting the axe, but the thing is they're also a very lean business, so I feel like they escaped most of the tragedy that befell a lot of divisions at Warner Brothers. But that still meant it was a stressful time. And I still had, I worked with 5 different editors and group editors and actually 7, if you include the associate editors. Like every week, it felt like we had a new editor. We had different artists like all the time. So I feel like I was the only one who had any sort of institutional memory in keeping that book together. It was like Scotch tape and bubble gum holding that thing together. And it was my first time doing it,
So they threw you in the meat grinder and then just said, hey, have fun.
Well, I think they do that I think this happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know that I would have to expect that. I didn't know that was how it was going to be. And I think in particular, this was a particularly weird time for DC. Like, I don't blame DC for going through rough times that they were, because it wasn't their fault. It was all stuff that was happening at the corporate level above them. And, so it was really hard for them to, I think, keep everything, all the plates spinning and stuff. So you had editors who were leaving or either getting laid off or who were leaving, jumping ship because they didn't know how long they were going to be able to stick around. So all the champions of that book left, and I was the only one left. I think the people who sort of inherited things like didn't really have any association with it. And, ultimately when they had to trim back the line, it was one of the first books they were like, all right, well, we'll get rid of this one.
Right.
But I can say I learned so much from that. Then I got to learn from the maestro, Mr. Jeff Johns, working with him on Flashpoint
2022.
Beyond.
You were involved in a pretty big project, and you got to work with some fantastic.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. Very fortunate. My Jeremy Adams is an old friend of mine. We came up in animation together, and he's we're really super tight. And we came into DC at the same time, and we had an idea for, to do a sort of small, like, not exactly a crisis sort of thing, not a huge event, but a story that took place in and around a huge event, like that had like that was it's a standalone story where the center of it was a big crisis level event, without actually necessarily being one. And we both love writing fun, quippy sort of fun dialogue, and fun stuff with different characters, putting different characters in a room together or in a ship together and seeing what what shakes out and how they interact with each other. That's just the thing that comes from doing animation, I think, probably. And we had a great idea for a story. In fact, it's still, I mean, we didn't end up doing it, so it's still out there. I hope we get to do it someday. But at one point during the pitch process, figuring out how we were going to do it with DC, I said, the crisis level event at the center of this story, really, let's just make it easier for ourselves. Let's just call it Flashpoint. Let's just say that Flashpoint is the thing that we're sort of in and around. And I'm trying not to give away too much because you never know, we might do this story. And everybody started calling it, they started doing that. We started thinking of it as Flashpoint. And it started feeling like a sequel in a lot of ways to Flashpoint, or at least an addendum to Flashpoint. And then we said, and it started looking like we were going to do it. And we said, we probably, if we're going to do this, we said to the editor, we're like, if we're going to do this, we probably ought to just check and see if Jeff Johns is cool with it. Now, I didn't know Jeff Johns. I had never met Jeff Johns, and neither had Jeremy. Like, we were just two guys who were new here. And we were like, can somebody call Jeff Johns and see if he's okay with it? And the editor, who had a good relationship with Jeff, called him, and Jeff said, as it was told to us, Jeff not only said, I love it, great idea, let's do it, but he said, I will write issue 0 as a jumping off point for you guys. And we were like, are you kidding me? That was like a dream come true. So then we all met and we got to meet Jeff for the first time, and it was the most amazing thing. We just all clicked. It was like we were old friends. And we, coming out of we all worked in TV, and in TV, you work in rooms with other writers all the time. And so you're used to kind of just bantering and chit-chatting around stuff and yes-anding everybody and adding things and questioning other things. And we just had a good vibe because of that. And I think a lot of comic book, and the reason why Jeremy and I came to DC, Dan DiDio, before he left, he hired us because we were TV writers who could get along with other writers. And I think he felt that wasn't something that you see enough of in comics. And so anyway, so that was once it started firing. And then Jeff was like, well, wait, I'm not just going to I don't want to just do issue 0. I want to do this whole thing with you guys. Let's all do it together. He's such a little kid. I love him.
Yeah.
He's so much fun to be around and to work with. And that energy is infectious. Jeremy has that too. Just super fun. I'm the opposite. Like right now, you can say I've got like energy and I'm like happy and everything. But when I'm working, I am the most intense one in the room. I'm the one who gets real quiet. I'm thinking through every single angle. I'm like processing things all the time. I always have my processing face is on all the time. So every time people will look at me like, oh, well, Tim hates whatever we're working on. Tim hates it. I'll be like, no, I'm just thinking, really.
Well, I'm excited if that other project comes about then, because you and Jeremy are great writers. Jeremy's been doing the Green Lantern, which has been great. And so yeah.
And his Flash run too. It's great.
His Flash run was great. So yeah. So
He's
if something else spawns out, I'm gonna reach out to you and we're gonna bring it on. Again,
Can I say something about my friend Jeremy, which is Jeremy was always a great writer, but Jeremy in comic books, I did not expect that he was going to be as naturally gifted at telling stories in comics as he has proven to be from day one. I just didn't expect it. Maybe you could say I underestimated him. I guess I did, in some ways, because I knew how hard it was for me, and he came in a little bit after me, and I was like tearing my hair out, from day one, and it was like a duck to water, and he loves it, and people love what he does, and I couldn't be happier for him.
Yeah. So you've been busy, is what it sounds like, since last time we talked.
Oh, that's what this was. This was the intro to say how busy I've been. See, this is the problem. I start talking, I don't stop.
Listen, people don't watch me interview people to hear me talk. So I love it when I have a guest that actually wants to talk and share about the creative process and things they're working on and things that get them excited. Because otherwise, if I had to like fish for questions all the time, people are like, this is so no, I love it. And if a creator's like, no, I want to talk, like, yes. So I reached out to you though because I was reading DC Connect and I saw your name. You got a new project coming up. Alan Scott Green Lantern. Like, let's go. I see the lantern right behind you. I see Alan Scott right behind you.
Yeah.
Tell me how this project and idea came about.
So this was, anybody who read Flashpoint Beyond knows that, there was a sort of in the climax of that story, there was a setup to something that we've seen that Jeff's been working on this year, which is not only his Justice Society, his JSA book, but also the New Golden Age, which is the New Golden Age #1, which the New Golden Age #1 special edition just came out last week and is on shelves, which is an awesome reprint of that issue, but then also has previews of all of the New Golden Age titles that are coming out this month. When is this dropping? This will
drop in like, I guess 2 weeks probably from recording once it's all said.
We're still in
editing.
October,
so it'll be in October. So
this is going to drop like right around when Alan Scott #1 comes out.
I think like the Sandman that Robert's doing will come out before like this. So there's a whole bunch that are coming out in October.
Yeah, like I think Sandman's out. Wesley Dodds is out tomorrow when we're recording this, so that'll already be out. And then Jay Garrick the Flash that Jeremy is doing will be out, I think, by then too. Anyway, those 3 titles, Jeff set up this thing and said, he called us, and he said, hey, he called me and he said, hey, what do you think about doing under this New Golden Age header, or this banner that we have, which then would lead into Dawn of DC and be part of Dawn of DC.
Right.
What do you think about doing an Alan Scott book? And I said, absolutely not. That feels like a third rail. Why would I want to do this? He hasn't had a book in 75 years.
Yeah.
And he, he's gone under, there's been a lot of opinions being thrown around about how they revealed that he's gay in the comics, and but I'm just kidding. I didn't say absolutely not. Like when Jeff calls, like I'm like, yes. Like I just say yes. Whatever he says, I say yes, because we did have the greatest experience working on Flashpoint Beyond together.
Right.
And so, anything that guy ever wants me to do, I will be first, hand up, first in line. I'll be there. Right. So we started talking about what the story would be, how we would kind of go back and revisit the origin story a little bit, but not completely, not just a total retelling. Okay. We would shade in some more detail based on what we now know about Alan's, identity and his personal life, and how that would fit into his life in the 30s and 1940s. And but then also at the center of it is this giant conceit that Jeff set up in Flashpoint Beyond and came up with in the New Golden Age and JSA. And it is that there are a group of characters, a group of, people, but characters for our purposes, who were at a certain point or at different points removed from the DC timeline. And it's such a Jeff Johns idea. Like all of these characters were removed, and I say that with so much love, removed from the timeline, and now they've all been reinserted back into the timeline. So in essence, what that ends up doing is, obviously, if you've ever seen Flashpoint, when you mess with the timeline, when little things, small changes, big changes, anything sort of changes the timeline, it can upend a lot of stuff, or, maybe not a lot of stuff, but certainly there are going to be different ways of looking at things. There are going to be some changes that happen. And so it had the effect of making a lot of Alan's story look like it was everything we knew, everything we've known for 75 plus years, more than that, I guess 80. Oh God, his first book came out in 1940, or 39, 40. So
yeah,
I can't do math.
I can't either. It's a long time, people. Just trust us. It's long.
So he, over 80 years. So he, it has the effect of making that everything we know kind of a retcon, because they're this important character who, spoiler alert, is the Golden Age Red Lantern, who's this one guy who is a the sort of hero of the Soviet Union and an answer to the Golden Age Green Lantern, basically, and the arch nemesis of Alan Scott that we as readers never knew about. And now we have to kind of go back and see what the story is like with him in Alan Scott's life as his arch nemesis, and what does that do to his life? Now, this is very exciting. Like, it's great story territory for me and for any writer, I think. But I said, right from the start, I was like, look, I don't want to treat this like we're going to upend everything and rewrite Alan's story completely. I feel like we've already revealed so much more information about Alan that changes how we look at him, that I don't think it's a good idea to just literally rewrite history, even though you have to in this particular, with these parameters that I've been given. But I said, what I'm most interested in doing is seeing how it stays the same. How is his life, how are the events of his life, as many as we can, how are they the same but shaded differently? Now that we have there's new information, there are new layers to it. I'm more interested in adding layers to the Golden Age than rewriting the Golden Age. And that's kind of the approach we've taken with the Alan Scott book. And I'm working with a great artist named Kian Tormey, who when they brought up Kian's name to me, my first thought was, I think he's one of the few folks out there who can do the acting, like who can get the subtext on the panel and on the page that I don't want to necessarily have to put in a balloon or a caption. I want you to be able to have a moment that you see on a character's face, and like you would in a live action movie, just sit there for a second and let them take something in, and you can get part of the story from that reaction, visual reaction. And I mean, our comic book artists are the greatest artists in the world. They're unbelievable. They're so creative and they're unbelievably fast. That's the thing I can't understand. That's a magic trick. But they all have different strengths, and not everybody nails the acting the way that I think Kian can and is doing. So I'm very excited for people to see what we put together, how it enhances, hopefully adds some layers to the story. Most people, I don't think, know Alan Scott's story. So but go back if you get a chance, read All American Comics number 16, or Secret Origins number 18 was a retelling they did of his story. Those are great to they're great companion pieces to our book, especially the first couple of issues.
And I say this as someone, I consider myself an avid comic reader, and I'm still inexperienced in the world of JSA characters. Like, it was just before my time frame for the most part. And I know Jeff Johns has been doing a really good job in introducing him, and there was even introduction in the TV show and the movies and stuff of these characters. So people are familiar with them. But did you have to go through a little bit of, like, when you got pitched the Alan Scott book, of, hey, I need to do some research myself, and go down a rabbit hole of reading more Alan Scott books, to just so you can do what you're trying to do, like you said, of doing a retelling a little bit, but being true to the character and with the parameters that you have been given, because they have changed Alan Scott's story, in years. So it's, how do you navigate that, and how did you prep for that?
I mean, I know you see these gray hairs, but they're not so gray that I was there reading those Golden Age books when they were coming out. And they weren't readily available as when I was a kid. Those stories weren't as accessible as the stuff that was on the spinner rack. When I was reading, like Batman Year 3 and Lonely Place of Dying, and and then Death and Reign of the Superman and all that stuff. Like, those things were happening, but I wasn't picking up Alan Scott,
Right.
or the Green Lantern from, because also I think you're like, wait a minute, that's not the Green Lantern, when you're a kid.
Right.
Like, I don't know what this is. And I didn't have those mentors and folks older than me who had grown up with those characters, who had the books or could tell me about them or anything. They weren't on TV. They weren't really on TV or anything like that. So it was so like many of us, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not the walking encyclopedia of DC history that Jeff Johns is.
Right. Nobody
Where
is.
nobody is. He's incredible. Although Jeremy's pretty good. He's got some random stuff
All
in his.
right. All right.
He's not bad. He's not bad. He's no Jeff Johns, but he's not so bad.
I'm just gonna clip that part of the interview. Jeremy's not bad. He's just no Jeff
He's
Johns.
no Jeff Johns.
I'm just gonna put that as a soundbite,
that.
and just no one have no context. What
No context. People will be like, "Oh, here he goes, going after Jeremy." uh, so yeah. So I did. I went back and just because that's the responsible thing to do, is go back and read. There's a couple of the volumes are up there on my shelf of the collected some of the big Golden Age stories for Alan. And and I went through, like, I mean, I'm probably like a lot of fans, like I went through all the wikis, and I went through every YouTube history of Alan Scott that I could find, because sometimes, like, I have to put the book down and just, like, put on the YouTube video. And gosh, I gotta say, for the cesspool that YouTube can be sometimes, there are some really awesome people out there who make these in-depth, historical documents that can really fill in some of the blanks or connect some of the pieces, that need connecting, especially when you have a character who's been around for 80 years,
Right.
and has had some different incarnations and some different characterizations, and then different Earths. There's different versions of of the character as we've seen them throughout the years. Anyway, yes, I absolutely did my research. However, I had not done anywhere near enough, because I don't think you ever can.
Right.
Like, I feel like it's also some of those original Golden Age stories. People are going to come after me now for this. There's a certain segment of Golden Age fans that are going to come after me now, but it's a different thing to read those comics. They were written and drawn so differently,
Yeah.
and they were meant for a different audience, and than I'm writing for today. And
Right.
And they can be a little bit of sometimes they can be a bit of a slog. They can be, there's a little bit of repetition sometimes in some of the characters, and you're like, this is just like that other guy in a lab coat who was doing a thing. He's the same doctor. What is this guy? So I mean, it's not that I don't love the characters, or I love the JSA and I love the characters. But some of those stories can be kind of tough to just sit through, and get through all of them. That's why I think that's what's so cool about getting to do the new Golden Age books, is like, we're going back, like, Rob Venditti and I, especially. I know Jeremy's book, I think is takes place a lot in the present day, and kind of goes back in flashbacks and stuff. But Rob's book and my book are very much set in the 30s and 40s. And it's those times in history, in America especially, there was a lot more going on than in the world than we saw in those original pre-World War II Golden Age comics. And so there are layers that are missing, I think, from those stories. And maybe that was a good thing, and maybe that was great. You keep the kids focused on something different other than the awful stuff that's going on in the world. But the kids are grown up now, and I think that looking at these stories and these characters through a little bit more of an accurate historical lens, and adding those layers to those
Yeah.
stories can be very it's fun for me, and I hope that it's fun for readers as
Yeah.
well.
Well, and even to that point, though, we have a new generation of comic book readers who are growing up in a time with information so readily available to them that wasn't there back when those were being written. So, like, it does make sense nowadays that comic books do reflect a little bit of our world of, everything like that, because at 8, 9, 10, they're seeing it and they're hearing it on the new, like, it's so much more readily available. So it's an interesting take, the it's a different generation of readers.
It's interesting too, because Vladimir Sokov is the Red Lantern, and he's the Soviet lantern character. And it's interesting because depending on what's going on in the world at any given moment, our attitude toward Russia certainly
Mm-hmm.
can shift a little bit here and there. And so I was a little daunting coming into this. I started trying to think about how to tell this story without just going what could have been the cheap and obvious route of mustache twirling Russian invader kind of a thing, which is not inaccurate based
Right.
on what people are experiencing right now in the world. Or our relationship with the Soviet Union was much more complex. This was pre-World War II when this book or at least America's involvement in World War II.
Right.
And so and the Soviet Union's involvement. So there's a lot more mystery to all that.
Mhm.
And so it was a daunting thing to kind of like come at it and figure out how do we do this without it telling a story about what's going on right now. I mean, there's a wonderful, I'm sure there are great writers out there who are going to tell stories, and you can even set them in the 1930s and 40s that are designed to tell you a story about what's going on in world politics today. But that wasn't the story I was setting out
Right.
to tell. And although politics play a part, ultimately the politics that concern me more in this story are the politics of being a closeted gay superhero in the 30s and 40s. And what does that mean, to be someone who stands for the law in the light, and technically by the laws of the day is a criminal at night? And what does that mean to your own self-image? And how do you get up in the morning? How do you do your job knowing, and how do you go and become a part of the brand new team that just formed when there's a piece of you that you're not telling them about,
Yeah.
that they could expel you for, or you could endanger their lives, because if someone found out who you are and what you do, that you're a criminal in your own bedroom.
Yeah.
And so there's so much complexity and so many interesting avenues to go with that we're trying to kind of hit some of that stuff and explore it a little bit and figure out what it means. What it ultimately means, though, for the story is that this isn't going to start out like a golden age book that you may pick up and read, a classic golden age book. It doesn't start out bright.
Yeah.
This is a story about a man coming out of the darkness into the light.
Yeah.
And in order to tell that story, we got to start in that darkness. And so there's some heavy stuff that's going to happen in the first few issues. And I hope that people stick with us and can understand that those things are a necessary part of the story. And hopefully we'll put some meat on the bones, so you'll understand sort of where we end up, where Alan ends up at the end of the story, and also understand that we're coming at it in the most historically accurate way we can. And maybe somebody might even learn a little something about what it would have meant to be somebody like Alan Scott in that time period, and how similar that can be. Speaking of telling stories about politics of today, but set in the early 20th century, how his story is very similar to stories that a lot of queer people still experience today, which
Right.
is, to me has been, just as a gay man myself, has been the most heartbreaking
Yeah.
part of working on this,
Yeah.
is how much of it is hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So hopefully people read stories like this and the world, learns from, our mistakes and our history.
Right. And it is. That's why I think, giving voice to the stories like this are so important in this day and age of, because yes, we have come away, but we still have a lot of growing as a society. And, to be able to see stories that take place. So we've been trying to do the math 80 years ago, and it's like we're still dealing, we're still dealing with some of these issues. And
I feel like, I don't know what it is. There's a tribalism that we've fallen victim to in our country, in America, certainly, but I think in the whole world, there is this tribalism. There is this, it's almost like a sporting mentality, us against them, the other team, and we're our team, and we hate everything the other guy stands for. And there it's so competitive and so vicious
yeah,
sometimes, and it seeps into everything. And so what I hope is that people get back to looking at comics as not only as art that is there for interpretation, that is being created by people to to inform and delight, but also that people can learn something by looking at and listening to the stories of people who on the surface may not be somebody who they would think they identified with.
right.
But when you peel back some of the layers, I'm a firm believer in, that our stories, as different as they may seem on the surface, are all the same inside, all of them. And I use this example a lot because it's my the closest one to me is I did a movie called Superman Man of Tomorrow, and I wrote the movie, and it is in essence, at its core, a coming out story. It's about Kal-El coming out as an alien to a world that he fears will hate and despise him if they know who he really is. And
Yeah.
that was a story that I told because I was a gay kid in Central Florida in the 90s, terrified of the same things that Kal-El is terrified of. Just mine was about a different piece of
Right.
who I was, and his was about that. And other people looked at that story and they saw it. With Superman's story, you see a story of being an immigrant, a stranger in a strange land who is despised for the color of your skin or for something else about you. And I think when but it's all, we all have that same, we all share a bond over
Yeah.
that same feeling. And if we can sort of peel back those outer layers and get to the heart of the story and the meat of it and realize, you know what? Somebody might read this and say, I'm not gay, but boy, do I understand what it feels like to be that lonely and to
Yeah.
feel that much on the outside of things that I don't know what I'm going to do. And so hopefully that's my great hope, is that people who would not normally want to pick up necessarily a story about, a queer character would pick that up and pick up this book and read it and maybe take away something that they identify with the character.
Well, I think that's a beautiful thing about storytelling, right? It brings us to a place where, even if we don't identify with a certain character, but we can find layers that we identify with and can relate to, because we all have stories that we all tell and that have been told and that we're trying to work out, and we're all just trying to do our best at this thing called life. And I think the more we can sit down and have human conversations with people and face to face and read these stories, I think it's so much better, because you get to see like, oh, people aren't as different as I might assume that they might be because of one or two things that on the out front look different from us. And it would just make the world a better place.
I think we'd all be a lot happier and we'd all enjoy our comics even
Yeah.
more. Right? So,
So, um, for you as a writer, how do you balance then going back and doing a little bit of research to figure out more about this character but still being able to tell the story that you want to tell without retrending. So, because like, you're like, oh, I don't want to tell a story that's been told before, but I want to bring freshness to it, but I want to bring respect. How do you balance that?
Yeah, great question. I don't freaking know. Like it's but it is a balancing act. There
Yeah.
is and here's where it comes into play is you want to honor what's there.
Yeah.
You want to honor what's come before, but you don't want to sort of be chained to it. You don't want to at the expense of the story that you're telling. You don't want, well, I can't do this because XYZ. There's an example in on the very first page of issue 1 of Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. And the first page, and anybody who's picked up the New Golden Age #1 special edition, they've seen this page in the preview. So this isn't a big spoiler. On that first page, there's a newspaper article, the front page, the headline of the bulletin, the newspaper, and it's got a photo, and it's a whole story about something that happened the day before, and it's that the Green Lantern has thwarted Solomon Grundy, a very golden age caper. If you read the text of what's going on in the article, I'm not going to spoil it too much, but the charges that are brought against Solomon Grundy after he's caught feel very, like a wacky sort of golden age story to me. But I will just say impersonating a priest is one of them. So if you look at that, it seems it's all very fun and everything, but I got a message from Andrew Marino, my editor, and he said, oh, Grundy actually had not been introduced at the time that our story is taking place. So technically it would still be another few years before we would see Grundy in the DC timeline. And we talked about it and we thought about it. The beauty of the twist in time that has brought us to this book by bringing, Vladimir Sokov back into the timeline. We had a little bit of, just a tiny bit of leeway to say, well, I think people will forgive us for not getting the history of that exactly right in this sense. And they will accept the fact that the change in the timeline might have pushed up Grundy's, appearance somehow. It's a very Flashpoint kind of thing. It's Flashpoint, Jeff describes the Flashpoint as like a bullet hitting glass, and it, shatters, outward, and it affects all different parts of that, the windshield, I guess. And that's sort of how I was like, okay, then it's fine. We won't change it from Grundy to something else. We'll keep Grundy, but in the back of my mind, I'm like a fan who's going, I hate it. I hate that it's not exact, it messes with the timeline a little bit, but it's such a small thing in the end that
well,
we'll balance. It's more important that we tell the story than it is that we, are chained to that, especially when we have an out in the twist in time that's happened.
And we'll timestamp this interview right here. So if people go, well, wait a second, we can say, look, Tim knows that too. All right.
Those are the questions you get at Comic-Con. Like, those are always the questions you get at Comic-Con. Excuse me. However,
did you know?
Did you know? And I love those folks. Like,
I do
because
too.
they're so much smarter than me about all this stuff, and they have so much more of so much of a handle on details that I wish I had a command of. But they keep you honest.
Yeah. And there's some I love too, is I love that passion too, because there's something that they care about so much that they're so involved that they know that, like, I wouldn't even been, I'm familiar with Solomon Grundy. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that wouldn't have lined up. So like, I'm like, kudos to you if you can.
I mean, I did all my research on that too, and still managed to get it wrong somehow. Like, I don't even know how I got that wrong, because I was embarrassed when Andrew was like, he doesn't come around to like 44 or something like that. And I was like, oh, how did I get that wrong? Anyway, that's the funny version, right? But to answer your question on a more sort of, a little bit more serious note, I think there's a lot of folks who are out there who are, there are people who just want to be mad about Alan Scott having been revealed to be gay. And there are folks who say all the time, I mean, every day I get people saying to me, like, by the way, Alan Scott didn't come out of the closet on my watch. Like, I got handed a character after that had already happened, and they said, please tell an authentic story about what it would be for him as a gay man in the 30s and 40s. And those were my marching orders, and I was very happy. I'm very happy to do it. But what I say to people is, this is not like, people frame it all the time. The question they frame all the time, they frame it as, you guys changed continuity. DC changed it and made him gay. And, he was straight before and now he's gay. And he wasn't. That's just the truth. I know you think that, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
And it's important for you to listen to queer people when we tell you what it means to be someone later in life who has been married to women, as a man who's been married to women, who's maybe had kids, who's dated women, who's, and who never showed any interest in, never displayed any interest in other men or anything like that.
Yeah.
These are people who exist in the world. They come out of the closet later in life all the time, every day. These people exist. They are your neighbors. They are your friends. They're your brothers. They're your fathers, grandfathers.
Yep.
They deserve as much as you do, as much as I do, and as much as anybody does, to have their stories told.
Yeah.
And so Alan Scott coming out as gay in the comics is not a retcon. It wasn't a change. It was more information that came out about the character. Now, the argument that people will come back with is, well, if you go and talk to the people who are writing the character, who created the character, they would tell you that he was not gay. And that's the beauty in some ways of a thing that's very frustrating, is that the character, unfortunately, in some ways, and fortunately in other ways, belongs to DC.
Right.
And DC is the one who gets to tell you what's canon and what's not, and how it works. And DC is the one who told you, this is a guy who's always been gay. And he just was either too afraid to tell anyone, or he was too afraid to tell himself. And he just didn't know, he couldn't figure it out. And it took him a while. So I hope that, what I tell those folks is, if someone in your life comes out of the closet late in life, you don't scream retcon in their face.
Right.
You don't, and hopefully you instead, lovingly treat them with respect and with the dignity they deserve. And, and you're there for them. That's what we ought to do as people. And that's what we ought to do for Alan too.
Yeah. I love hearing, that kind of response and answer to it, because I think it is important to, understand that there are different stories out there, and what we assume that we know about people might not be the truth, quite frankly. Yeah. And just because what is being told doesn't line up with what we assumed we knew about someone, doesn't mean that it's not true. And so, I just think this is an important story that you get to be a part of and tell. And I'm excited to dig into this.
It's a great honor. And it's, that part of his story, while it's, at the forefront of this book, it is not, the book is about about bigger things.
Right.
And that is part of the story, and it is part of the theme of the book, and that keeps the story moving. But ultimately, I think what we have put together is a story that will, hopefully inspire and delight you, and will be fun, and will add some things to Green Lantern lore and mythology that maybe you won't expect, because I have a lot of thoughts on that. Hopefully ultimately it'll be just entertaining, and everyone will enjoy getting to live in the golden age a little bit, and visit these characters and all of their great complexity, and and hopefully people will want more. I mean,
I,
like we issue 3, we're working on I mean, I've done it, but the artists are working on issue 3 right now, and it's got it's guest starring the Spectre, who is only just recently become the Spectre. He became Spectre in Jim Corrigan died in 1940, so this is early 1941, and so I've had a lot of fun with this
yeah,
character, like at a time when, as I see it, it's sort of like Doctor Who when he first, regenerates. He's kind of still cooking for a while. He's not quite who he's gonna be yet, and
yeah,
he's sort of a little bit of the old guy and a little bit of the new guy, and you know, just bouncing off the walls. And he's not quite bouncing off the walls, but he is certainly he's a little bit more Jim Corrigan in some parts than he is the Spectre, and I really enjoy that. And I hope that folks like the idea of bringing in other characters from the JSA and from the Golden Age, and that they'll want to see more stories with those characters going forward.
yeah. This is such a excitement for me because this is getting me exposed to, the foray of I had Robert on a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the Sandman and with Riley Rosmo on it, like, and so like I got excited about that, and you're talking about Jeremy's book, and like just so I think exposing even some of us diehard comic fans like to even more in-depth characters that have been around forever. As a fan, I'm looking forward to just learning more about the golden age of comics a little bit.
Yeah, I think you will. Look, Jeff Johns isn't going to let us make a book that isn't at its heart true to the golden age,
Right.
Because it's something that he just loves so passionately, that I think everybody's in safe hands.
Yeah. So obviously the date of the book comes out October
24th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So gang, go check it out. And it's solicited as what, 6 issues?
6 issues. Yeah.
So,
and then when everyone demands more, maybe we'll get more. We'll see.
Right.
But this story will definitely, it's got a beginning, middle, and an end, and it points and it'll point toward the future and give us, into future stories that we could see someone tell, or we could tell ourselves, with Alan and with the Justice Society.
So gang, go check it out. I know I'm super excited to explore more into these golden age characters. Tim, I know this is obviously your focus right now. Alan's got Green Lantern. Is there anything else that we didn't get to touch on that you want to mention of?
I mean, listen, stay tuned, because I don't know if there are any Masters of the Universe fans out there, but I got a chance to come in and work on to write and help produce the season 2 of the Kevin Smith series on Netflix. And after working on season 1 and doing the comic book for prequel for season 1, and it's coming out soon. We'll be probably hearing about it any day now. Whenever they do Geek Week at Netflix, I'm sure we'll know more about when it's coming out. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. They don't tell me anything. So that's coming soon, and I hope people enjoy it. I loved the first 10 episodes, but the next 5 episodes are they're pretty intense. It's gonna be fun. And the cast is unreal.
I love season 1, and what's so funny is from last time we talked to this last summer, we were cleaning out the old farmhouse, and my mom just brought me in boxes of all my Masters of the Universe. All of them. I have almost every vehicle in my garage right now.
Yes.
I've got Castle Grayskull. I've got Snake Mountain. I've got the Eternia place that is up. Like,
no.
I'm slowly taking my time to slowly clean off 20 years of dust from a barn.
Did you? So wait, was that from the 2000 show or from the original 80s show?
The 80s show.
Okay. Did you watch the 2002 show?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. This was, and the movie. Did you see the movie, the live action movie?
Did I see the live
action movie?
Are you kidding me? I played that VHS
Do you know, I recently saw it with Dolph Lundgren at a screening that Mattel put together. It was unreal. It was I'll just drop that name over here. He played He-Man in the movie, everybody who's too young to know. So our show, and you saw a little bit of it in season 1, but our show is in many ways we always call it a sequel to the classic era. And that doesn't just mean the old cartoon or the old toys or the mini comics, or it also means the movie. It also means the 2002 show. And, you know, there's so much lore to draw from and to honor. And so we got to have a lot of fun. And not only do we get to have fun doing that, but we also have, like I said, this cast is unreal. William Shatner is in the cast of Masters of the Universe Revolution. And it was about one of the best, coolest days of my life.
So exciting.
So yeah. So stay tuned. That's coming out soon.
So gang, watch for when I invite Tim back on and we just geek out about Masters of the Universe for an hour next time.
Oh, absolutely. Like when that show comes out, I'm back.
Yes, let's do it.
We got plenty of stuff to talk about.
We will hit it up.
By the way, if this is coming out around the time that Alan Scott drops on October 24th.
Yep, it'll come out.
I also mentioned that I managed to weasel my way into getting to go to, if you're in the Los Angeles area, to a store called Revenge Of that is doing a comic book creator block party on October 28th. It's going to be so cool. Look it up. The guest list is unreal. It's presented by Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum, and it's good. The list of people that are there doing signings, doing talkbacks and panels, and there's going to be music and food. And it's, you know, they presented it to me as we're trying to really bring the Los Angeles comic book community together and try to build the bonds between all of us who are out here making comics. And it's just going to be so much fun. So come on out, bring your copies of Alan Scott. You know, I'll deface them with a Sharpie and we can have some fun.
Yeah. Patton and Jordan's Minor Threats was so good too. Like, so like
Right?
you say those two and they're putting together. And I know a handful of people that watch the show that are LA based creators and YouTubers and stuff. So hopefully some of them
they're all going to be there. They were on the guest list before I managed to like get them. I tricked them into putting me on the list.
I love it.
By the way, I got to write for Patton. Like one of the first things I did in my career was he played Space Cabbie on Justice League Action, and I wrote a short that stars him. And I got to go to the record and meet him, and he was it's the only time I ever really interacted with him. I've seen him around town, but the only time I ever interacted with him was when we were working together. And oh man, that guy, talk about somebody who can out nerd you at every turn. Like he will, I'm going to get I'm sure a lesson in Golden Age superheroes and every other superhero from him when I see him. So
I hope so. I hope we have stories the next time we talk of how Patton corrected you.
I'm sure. I'm going to hand him a copy of Alan Scott #1. He's going to go, well, wrong.
Like, let me take your black Sharpie. I'll change him for a red Sharpie. So, well, Tim, where can people follow along with you and what you got working?
Yeah. I don't know why I'm still on the dumpster fire that is Twitter X, but I am, and I am Tim Sheridan I am Tim Sheridan. I'm on Blue Sky, which a lot of comic book people are on, which is great. You can find me on Threads. I love Tim Sheridan. I'm on Instagram. I love Tim Sheridan. So that's where I make all my announcements. If you were just in New York, you would have seen me at New York Comic Con, but you know, this is after that. Apparently.
So you probably did, and if you didn't, shame on you. So go to LA.
I'm to LA on the 28th.
So, well, Tim, it has been a delight talking about comics with you. I always love when I have you on, just to talk about all things nerdy. So
we'll do it again.
Let's do it. So, with that being said, gang, go to your shops this week. Pick up Alan Scott, Green Lantern. Check out some of the other Golden Age books that are coming out. And as always, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.